Some people abuse a badge because they believe no one will ever question it. But the most dangerous mistake is assuming the quietest person in the room has already lost. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments below. And if you believe dignity matters more than appearances, remember this story. The old courthouse in Ashcroft County stood beneath a gray October sky, its limestone columns casting long shadows across the broad front steps as television vans lined the curb and reporters rehearsed polished introductions for what everyone expected to be another ordinary hearing. Nobody noticed Naira Ellison until she stepped out of the transport vehicle. At 38, she carried herself with remarkable composure despite the plain charcoal sweater beneath a county-issued jacket and the weary expression of someone who had learned years ago that defending herself too early often made people stop listening altogether. A pair of deputies escorted her through the courthouse entrance while conversations faded into whispers. Some recognized her face from the local news. Others simply assumed guilt because they saw restraints before they saw a human being. Deputy Cole Maddox enjoyed moments like these. Tall, broad-shouldered, and admired by younger officers, he had built a reputation for projecting authority with dramatic confidence. He believed respect was created through intimidation rather than earned through fairness, and every public appearance became another opportunity to reinforce that belief. As cameras flashed outside, Cole leaned slightly toward another deputy and smirked. "Watch this," he muttered just quietly enough that only those closest could hear. Inside courtroom 4, polished oak benches reflected the pale morning light pouring through towering windows. Judge Everett Holloway adjusted the papers before him with deliberate precision. His face revealed nothing, yet his eyes lingered for a heartbeat longer than necessary when Naira entered. Almost no one noticed that subtle hesitation. The courtroom clerk announced the case while spectators settled into their seats. A blogger whispered that this hearing might become today's biggest headline. Two law students quietly debated whether the defendant looked frightened. An elderly veteran folded his arms, studying every movement without saying a word. Naira never looked toward the audience. Her attention drifted across the room until it paused on a small security camera mounted high in the far corner above the jury box. She observed it only briefly before lowering her gaze again. The movement was so subtle that nobody except one freelance photographer happened to notice it. Deputy Cole interpreted her silence as weakness. "Keep moving," he said loudly enough for the gallery to hear, emphasizing every word as though performing for an invisible audience. A few people exchanged uncomfortable glances. The comment itself was not especially harsh, but the tone carried unmistakable contempt. Naira complied without protest. She neither hurried nor resisted. That calm unsettled Cole more than he cared to admit. People usually argued, cried, apologized, or begged. She simply walked. Judge Holloway cleared his throat. "Bring the defendant forward." The room became unusually still. Even the clicking keyboards of reporters slowed. Cole stepped beside Naira to remove one restraint according to courtroom procedure. Instead of finishing efficiently, he deliberately prolonged the moment, forcing unnecessary attention toward her while several spectators leaned forward to watch. Naira remained motionless. Her breathing never changed. Her expression revealed neither anger nor fear. Cole laughed under his breath. "You think staying quiet makes you look innocent?" he asked. She answered with nothing more than steady eye contact. For reasons he could not explain, that silence irritated him more than any argument could have. A young bailiff named Roman Keene shifted uneasily near the courtroom door. He had seen countless defendants enter that courtroom, yet something about this exchange felt different. He glanced toward Judge Holloway, expecting some brief instruction to move the proceedings along. None came. The judge simply watched. That silence echoed louder than any command. Cole mistook it for permission. He made another dismissive remark designed to embarrass Naira in front of everyone present, prompting scattered nervous laughter from two spectators near the back row while most of the room looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The humiliation hung in the air like cold fog. Naira slowly lifted her eyes toward the same security camera again. This time, the faintest hint of a smile touched one corner of her mouth before disappearing almost instantly. The photographer lowered his camera, puzzled by what he had just captured. Why would someone smile at a moment like this? Judge Holloway noticed it too. His fingers stopped turning the page for less than a second before continuing, as though nothing unusual had happened. Roman noticed the pause. Cole did not. He remained convinced the courtroom belonged entirely to him. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the city skyline, although no rain had yet begun to fall. Inside, the air conditioning hummed softly above the growing silence. Nobody realized they had stopped focusing on the charges listed in the case file. Every eye had shifted toward the strange calm surrounding Naira Ellison. She looked once more at the camera mounted high above the courtroom, then lowered her gaze without speaking a single word. At that exact moment, an aging maintenance worker paused outside the courtroom door, glanced toward the security monitor in the hallway, frowned as if recognizing something nobody else had seen, and quietly reached for the radio clipped to his belt. The maintenance worker never touched the radio. His hand stopped halfway because something inside the courtroom changed before he could speak. Deputy Cole Maddox took one confident step closer, expecting Naira Ellison to lower her eyes the way so many frightened defendants had done before. Instead, she looked directly at him with an expression so calm it almost seemed detached from everything happening around her. The silence irritated him even more. "Look at you," he said with a dismissive laugh that carried across the room. "Still acting like you're the only person here who knows something." A few people forced nervous smiles, uncertain whether they were witnessing ordinary courtroom arrogance or something far more serious. Judge Everett Holloway remained motionless behind the bench. His face revealed nothing, yet the clerk noticed his pen had stopped moving. Roman Keene shifted his weight again, his instincts telling him the hearing was drifting away from procedure. Naira slowly exhaled. There was no anger in her eyes, only careful calculation, as though every passing second mattered more than every word being spoken. Cole reached toward her again with exaggerated confidence, determined to establish control in front of the crowded gallery. What happened next lasted only an instant, yet witnesses would spend months arguing over the details. A brief movement interrupted Cole's advance, unexpected enough that he immediately lost his balance and stumbled backward before ending up on the polished courtroom floor, stunned and completely disoriented. The courtroom gasped as one. No one had expected the encounter to end that way, and because everything happened so quickly, very few people could later explain exactly what they had seen. There was no prolonged struggle, no chaotic confrontation, only one controlled defensive action followed by absolute stillness. Cole remained conscious, but too surprised to react immediately, staring toward the ceiling with disbelief written across his face. The room froze. Reporters forgot to type. Cameras remained pointed toward the center aisle. Even the old ventilation system seemed suddenly louder than the people inside the courtroom. Roman instinctively stepped forward with two other bailiffs. But before anyone reached her, Naira quietly lowered herself to her knees and placed both hands where everyone could clearly see them. She offered no resistance. She made no attempt to leave. She did not even look at the deputy she had just stopped. "I'm staying exactly where I am," she said in an even voice. "Please continue with your responsibilities." Her calm response confused everyone more than the unexpected defensive movement itself. One reporter whispered, "Why would she surrender immediately?" Another quietly answered, almost like she planned for this. Judge Holloway finally rose from his chair. "Order," he called firmly, though his voice carried far less certainty than before. Everyone remained calm. Yet the calm had already returned to only one person in the courtroom. Naira's breathing remained perfectly steady. Roman approached carefully, expecting fear or panic, but found neither. "Ma'am," he said softly, "please remain still." She gave a small nod before he had even finished speaking. "I wasn't planning to move," she replied. Roman hesitated. Most defendants argued. Many shouted. Some cried. She simply cooperated without hesitation. Across the gallery, freelance journalist Tessa Rowan reviewed the photographs on her camera. One image immediately caught her attention. Just seconds before everything changed, Naira had been looking directly toward the security camera mounted above the jury box instead of at the deputy standing beside her. Tessa zoomed in. The timestamp matched almost perfectly. "That can't be coincidence," she murmured under her breath. Cole finally accepted help standing. Embarrassment quickly replaced his surprise. He looked around the courtroom, realizing dozens of witnesses had just watched him lose control of the situation he had tried so hard to dominate. His jaw tightened. She attacked an officer, he declared loudly, attempting to reclaim authority. But the confidence in his voice sounded thinner now. Several spectators exchanged uncertain looks because the event they had witnessed did not resemble the dramatic version already forming in Cole's description. Roman glanced toward Judge Holloway, waiting for instructions. Instead of speaking immediately, the judge looked at Naira. Their eyes met for only a heartbeat. Something unspoken passed between them, subtle enough that almost everyone missed it. Almost everyone except Tessa, who lowered her camera again. "He's not looking at her like a stranger," she whispered into her voice recorder. "He's looking at someone he recognizes." At the back of the courtroom, the maintenance worker finally pressed the button on his radio, then stopped himself before speaking. His eyes remained fixed on the hallway security monitor connected to the courthouse camera system. One small indicator light had changed from green to amber. It had never done that before during a hearing. "That's odd," he muttered. Inside the courtroom, Naira slowly lifted her gaze one final time toward the same security camera above the jury box. For the briefest moment, relief replaced the unreadable calm on her face. It was not the expression of someone trapped by circumstances. It was the expression of someone silently confirming that the first step of a much larger plan had unfolded exactly as expected. Across the room, Tessa quietly closed her notebook and whispered words that nobody else heard. She never wanted to escape, she said. She wanted every camera in this building pointed at this exact moment. No one in courtroom 4 realized that the most important person in the building was no longer the judge. It was whoever had just begun watching from somewhere no one could see. The uneasy silence lingered only a few seconds before every ceiling light flickered once. Then again, reporters instinctively looked upward. Court staff exchanged puzzled glances. Judge Everett Holloway frowned, as though recognizing a pattern he wished he had never seen. Before anyone could ask what was happening, every light inside the courtroom went dark. Gasps echoed across the gallery as emergency lighting slowly illuminated the room in a pale amber glow. The polished oak walls suddenly looked older, colder, almost unfamiliar. Computer monitors on the clerk's desk shut off simultaneously. The digital recording system stopped. Even the courtroom clock froze. A low electronic tone echoed through the silent chamber. Deputy Cole Maddox instinctively reached for his portable radio. Only static answered him. Roman Keene checked his own radio with the same result. Nothing. Absolute silence. Then every inactive courtroom monitor suddenly powered back on without warning. Instead of the county seal, a plain black screen appeared with a single white sentence typed across the center. "Do not continue this trial." Nobody spoke. A second line appeared beneath the first. "This court is under observation." Several spectators quietly stood before being instructed to remain seated. The clerk stared at the screen in disbelief. One of the television reporters whispered, "Is this some kind of cyber attack?" Another shook his head. "County systems aren't connected like this." Judge Holloway's face lost what little color remained. His hands rested on the bench so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. He did not appear surprised by the message itself. He appeared terrified that it had arrived today. Naira Ellison looked at the screen only briefly before lowering her eyes again. She showed no confusion whatsoever. That alone caught Roman's attention. Most people looked frightened by the mysterious interruption. She looked as though she had been waiting for a train that had finally arrived on schedule. Cole recovered first, forcing confidence back into his voice. "Nobody move," he ordered loudly. "This is probably some idiot trying to disrupt court." His words sounded less convincing than he intended because the radios still refused to work. Across the gallery, Tessa Rowan quietly continued recording voice notes on a battery-powered recorder that had never connected to the courthouse network. "Judge Holloway isn't reacting like someone surprised," she whispered. "He's reacting like someone who hoped this day would never come." The maintenance worker stepped carefully into the doorway. "Your Honor," he called respectfully. "Every hallway monitor in the building is showing the same message." Before Holloway could answer, another sentence slowly appeared beneath the first two. "Verify camera 9. Roman looked toward the courtroom ceiling. Camera 9. The one above the jury box. The same camera Naira had looked at twice before anything unusual happened. Tessa immediately remembered the photographs stored on her camera. Cole looked confused. "What's camera 9? He asked impatiently. The maintenance worker swallowed. "It's not part of the courtroom recording system anymore." Every eye turned toward him. It was disconnected from the public archive years ago after a renovation. We only kept it running for internal maintenance testing. The room became perfectly still again. Judge Holloway slowly closed his eyes for a brief second before opening them. "Who else knows that?" he asked. The maintenance worker hesitated. "Only facilities management, and whoever still has administrator access." Roman noticed something important. Naira's expression had not changed. Not once. She had heard every word without showing the slightest surprise. It was impossible to ignore. "Ma'am," Roman asked quietly, "did you know about Camera 9? She looked at him for several seconds before answering. "I knew someone wanted it forgotten." That was all she said. No explanation followed. Cole immediately pointed toward her. "See? She knows something. She's behind this." His accusation filled the room, yet it landed with far less force than before. Too many unanswered questions now surrounded everyone else. The courtroom doors suddenly opened as two county technology supervisors hurried inside carrying laptops. Within seconds, they connected directly to the courtroom network. One technician frowned. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. "Nobody broke into the system. Then how is every monitor displaying that message?" Another employee asked. She stared silently at the screen before answering. "Because the message wasn't sent into the network." She looked directly at Judge Holloway. It came from inside the building. The words settled over the courtroom like heavy stone. Tessa immediately circled the sentence in her notebook. Roman slowly turned toward the hallway. Someone inside the courthouse had access no one should possess. Someone knew about Camera 9. Someone knew exactly when this hearing would begin. Judge Holloway remained frozen behind the bench, but one tiny detail escaped almost everyone present. His eyes were no longer fixed on Naira. They were fixed on the second-floor observation window overlooking the courtroom. Behind the dark glass, someone had been standing there only moments earlier. Now the window was empty. Fear spreads much faster than truth, and inside the courthouse, someone was counting on everyone chasing the wrong story. The technology supervisors continued scanning the courthouse servers while deputies sealed every entrance and hallway. Reporters expected an evacuation order, but none came. Instead, uncertainty settled over the building like a heavy winter fog. Judge Everett Holloway quietly instructed everyone to remain seated until the source of the security breach could be identified. His voice sounded controlled, yet the slight tremor beneath each sentence did not escape Roman Keene. The young bailiff had spent years reading body language inside courtrooms, and he knew the difference between authority and anxiety. This was anxiety. Cole Maddox, however, refused to let the attention drift away from Naira Ellison. Embarrassed by what had happened only minutes earlier, he pointed toward her once again. "She's distracting everyone," he insisted. "Whatever this cyber stunt is, she's connected to it." His accusation echoed through the silent courtroom, but instead of creating confidence, it produced hesitation. Too many people had already witnessed events that no longer matched the simple narrative he was trying to build. Tessa Rowan quietly watched every expression in the room. She noticed something peculiar. Whenever Cole spoke, Judge Holloway never looked at him. He looked toward Roman instead, almost as though silently expecting the younger man to do something. Roman felt the weight of that glance without understanding why. Just then, a senior investigator from the county's Digital Crimes Division hurried into the courtroom carrying a sealed evidence envelope. "We found this in the hallway outside the server room," she announced. Every conversation stopped. She handed the envelope directly to Roman because he stood closest. "No fingerprints," she added. "It was placed where someone knew we'd find it." Roman carefully opened the envelope. Inside rested a plain silver USB drive without any label. Cole stepped forward immediately. "That's it," he declared. "That's what they're using." The investigator connected the drive to an isolated forensic laptop while everyone watched. A loading screen appeared for only a moment before the examiner frowned. "It's empty," she said. "There's absolutely nothing on it." Cole looked irritated. "That's impossible." The examiner checked again using a second forensic program. The result remained identical. No files, no hidden partitions, no deleted data, nothing. "Someone wasted our time," Cole muttered. But Roman did not share that conclusion. He turned the USB drive over in his hand. It felt unusually heavy for an empty device. Tessa noticed him studying it more carefully than anyone else. Across the courtroom, Naira briefly looked toward the drive before returning her attention to the silent courtroom monitor. Her expression never changed. Roman walked slowly toward her. "Have you ever seen this before?" he asked in a calm voice. She answered without hesitation. No, he studied her face. "Do you know why someone would leave an empty drive?" Naira looked directly at him. "Sometimes people don't leave evidence," she replied quietly. "Sometimes they leave a question." Roman stood silent for several seconds. Her answer sounded less like evasion than experience. Before he could ask another question, Cole interrupted. "Don't play her games, Roman." His voice carried across the courtroom. "She's manipulating everyone." Roman slipped the USB back into the evidence envelope without responding. The reaction surprised Cole. Usually Roman agreed with senior deputies without hesitation. Today he simply remained thoughtful. Meanwhile, the technology supervisor suddenly called out from across the room. "We found something." Every head turned. "Not on the courthouse network," she clarified. "On the building access logs." She projected the information onto one functioning monitor. At precisely 8:37 that morning, someone had entered the restricted maintenance corridor beside the courtroom. Access had been granted using a master credential assigned years earlier. "Who owns that credential?" Judge Holloway asked quietly. The technician hesitated before answering. "Officially, nobody." The room grew silent again. "The credential belonged to a retired facilities administrator," she continued. "He passed away almost 6 years ago." Reporters immediately began whispering among themselves. Tessa wrote one sentence in large letters across her notebook. "Dead credentials don't open secure doors." Cole folded his arms. "So someone copied an old access card?" "No," the technician answered. "The original credential was authenticated. Our system believes the actual card entered the building." Even Judge Holloway appeared shaken by that explanation. Roman looked toward the maintenance worker standing near the doorway. The older man slowly nodded. "That MasterCard was never recovered after he died," he admitted. Everyone assumed it had been destroyed. A chill spread through the courtroom. Whoever had entered the restricted hallway that morning possessed something no one should still have. Cole stepped toward Roman once more. "We need to transfer her immediately," he insisted, "before whoever's helping her tries something else." Roman looked from Cole to Naira, then down at the supposedly empty USB drive still resting inside the evidence envelope. For reasons he could not explain, none of the pieces fit together. If Naira had orchestrated the disruption, why surrender so calmly? Why remain exactly where everyone could see her? Why would an empty drive be delivered to investigators instead of hidden? None of it made sense. Across the courtroom, Naira finally spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow reaching Roman clearly through the silence. "The first thing people hide is evidence," she said. "The second thing they hide is who wanted you to find it." Roman slowly lifted his eyes toward the observation window on the second floor. The glass reflected only darkness now, but he could not shake the feeling that someone had been standing there moments before, quietly watching every decision he made. The truth rarely arrives all at once. It appears in fragments, usually after everyone has already decided whom to blame. The courthouse remained sealed while investigators searched every hallway, utility room, and maintenance corridor. Outside, news helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live speculation to thousands of viewers who still believed the hearing had simply descended into chaos. Inside, the atmosphere had changed completely. Nobody spoke with confidence anymore. Every new discovery created more questions than answers. Deputy Cole Maddox paced impatiently near the courtroom entrance, growing increasingly frustrated that the investigation no longer centered on Naira Ellison. Each passing minute felt like another public embarrassment. He caught reporters whispering among themselves, noticed cameras drifting away from him, and understood something he hated. He was no longer controlling the story. Roman Keene remained beside the evidence table, staring at the supposedly empty USB drive. He had asked the forensic examiner to inspect it 3 separate times using different equipment. Every result remained identical. No files, no hidden storage, nothing. Yet something about the object refused to feel meaningless. Across the room, Naira sat quietly under supervision, her hands folded comfortably in front of her. She looked less like someone awaiting judgment and more like someone waiting for another person to arrive. Tessa Rowan noticed the same thing. She approached Roman cautiously. "Can I ask you something off the record?" she whispered. Roman nodded. "Have you ever seen someone this calm after everything that's happened today?" Roman looked toward Naira before answering. No, Tessa hesitated. Neither have I. Their conversation ended as one of the county archivists entered carrying a thick storage box coated in years of dust. Your Honor, the archivist called. We searched the inactive courthouse records like you requested. Judge Everett Holloway looked noticeably uncomfortable. Did you find it? He asked. The archivist slowly placed a faded personnel file onto the clerk's desk. The cover contained one name, Naira Ellison. The courtroom fell silent once again. Cole immediately frowned. That's impossible. Roman looked confused. Why would this courthouse have a personnel file on her? The archivist adjusted his glasses. Because she worked with this courthouse years ago. Every eye turned toward Naira. She said nothing. Judge Holloway remained seated, but his expression hardened as though an old memory had just returned without permission. Roman carefully opened the aging file. Inside rested identification photographs, unlike anything the courtroom expected. Naira appeared younger, dressed in a dark federal investigative jacket, wearing an official credential around her neck. Several commendation letters followed. One described her work assisting complex financial investigations involving public corruption. Another praised her exceptional attention to evidence preservation. None of the documents resembled the history of an ordinary criminal defendant. Cole stepped closer, clearly unsettled. That doesn't prove anything, he argued. People change. Roman continued turning pages. Then he stopped. A newspaper clipping had been preserved inside the folder. The headline referred to a major corruption investigation from nearly 9 years earlier. Several names had been blacked out, but one sentence remained visible. Lead investigator Naira Ellison resigns following unresolved case. Tessa quickly copied the headline into her notebook. She wasn't hiding from the justice system, she whispered. She used to be part of it. Judge Holloway slowly removed his reading glasses. His eyes remained fixed on the old photograph inside the personnel file. Recognition finally replaced uncertainty. He knew exactly who Naira was. Roman noticed immediately. Your Honor, he asked carefully, have you met Ms. Ellison before? Holloway answered too quickly. No, the single word sounded rehearsed rather than truthful. Before anyone could respond, the elderly archivist quietly cleared his throat. Respectfully, Judge, he said, your signature appears on several correspondence letters inside that file. Every head turned back toward the judge. Holloway remained silent. Roman opened another folder and found 3 official memorandums addressed directly to Judge Everett Holloway from nearly a decade earlier. Each carried Naira Ellison's name. Cole looked from the documents to the judge in disbelief. You knew her? He asked. Holloway finally spoke, choosing each word carefully. I knew of her. The distinction sounded deliberate, but it convinced almost no one. Naira calmly watched the exchange without interrupting. She did not accuse anyone. She did not defend herself. She simply allowed the documents to speak louder than she ever could. Roman continued reviewing the file until one final page slipped loose onto the table. It contained only a short administrative notice. Case closed by judicial order. The case number had been removed with black ink years earlier. Tessa immediately recognized the significance. Someone wanted the case forgotten, she murmured. Roman looked toward Naira once again. Did you come here because of that investigation? He asked softly. Naira answered with quiet honesty. I came because unfinished stories eventually find their own ending. Cole laughed dismissively, trying to recover the confidence slipping away from him. Or maybe you came because you got caught. Naira did not respond to him. She looked only at Judge Holloway. For the first time that day, the judge could not hold her gaze. He lowered his eyes toward the forgotten file resting on the bench between them. Tessa noticed one final detail that no television camera captured. Hidden beneath the oldest memorandum was a handwritten note signed only with the letter H. The message contained 7 simple words. She knows more than she should ever remember. The most dangerous evidence is not the document that disappears. It is the document that everyone believes once existed until they discover it never officially did. The handwritten note beneath the memorandum transformed the mood inside courtroom for more than anyone expected. Judge Everett Holloway immediately instructed the clerk to secure every page from the personnel file, while county investigators requested archived records connected to the corruption inquiry from 9 years earlier. What should have taken only a few minutes quickly became something no one could explain. Every database search returned the same answer. No matching case could be found. The case number listed in the old memorandum did not exist. The federal reference attached to Naira Ellison's commendation letters pointed to an empty directory. Even the archived newspaper article mentioned an investigation without identifying any official court filing. Tessa Rowan watched the technicians repeat the searches again and again. Each attempt produced another dead end. "That's impossible," one records specialist whispered. "Paperwork like this always leaves a trail." Roman Keene stood beside the evidence table, comparing the physical documents with the digital records displayed on a laptop. The documents in front of him clearly referred to an investigation, yet every electronic system insisted the investigation had never been opened. It was as though history itself had been carefully rewritten. Cole Maddox folded his arms with renewed confidence. "Maybe because none of it is real," he said. "Maybe those papers are fake." The accusation sounded convenient, but the county archivist immediately shook his head. "These files have been stored in our underground archive for years," he replied. "The paper stock, ink, and storage tags all match records from nearly a decade ago." Cole frowned. "Then where's the case?" No one answered because no one could. Naira remained seated quietly, listening as professionals argued over facts that refused to fit together. She neither interrupted nor defended herself. Judge Holloway finally looked toward her. "If you already knew this would happen," he asked carefully, "why come here today?" She held his gaze without hesitation. "Because today was the first day someone tried to erase the evidence badly enough for everyone else to notice." The courtroom fell silent again. Roman replayed her words in his mind. They sounded less like a dramatic statement and more like a conclusion reached after years of waiting. One of the digital investigators suddenly called across the room. "I found another inconsistency." Everyone gathered around the monitor. According to courthouse scheduling logs, this hearing should have been assigned to courtroom 2. He enlarged another screen. "Somebody changed it to courtroom 4 just after midnight." Judge Holloway looked genuinely surprised. "Who authorized that?" The investigator shook his head. "The authorization field is blank." Tessa immediately underlined another note. "Blank authorization. Empty USB. Missing case. Forgotten camera." None of the mysteries seemed connected until they were viewed together. Roman slowly turned toward camera 9 mounted above the jury box. "Whoever changed the courtroom assignment knew this camera would be here," he murmured. Naira looked up briefly but remained silent. Cole noticed the exchange and stepped closer. "Enough riddles," he snapped. "If she knows something, make her answer." Roman surprised everyone by calmly responding before Naira could speak. "She's answered every direct question we've asked." Cole stared at him. "You're taking her side now." "I'm taking the side of whatever actually happened," Roman replied. The tension between the two deputies became impossible to ignore. Reporters quietly shifted their cameras toward them instead of toward Naira. For the first time that morning, Cole appeared isolated. The humiliation he had tried to place on someone else had quietly begun circling back toward him. Just then, the courtroom doors opened once more. An elderly man wearing a modest gray jacket entered slowly with the assistance of a cane. None of the deputies recognized him, yet the county archivist immediately stood. "Mr. Walter Grayson?" he asked in surprise. The old man nodded. "I received a call asking whether I remembered an old courthouse renovation." I turned toward him. "I supervised the installation of camera 9, he said. Roman stepped forward. "Can you tell us why that camera was kept separate from the others?" Walter looked toward the ceiling before answering. "Because it wasn't installed for security." Confused murmurs spread across the courtroom. "Then why?" Tessa asked. Walter hesitated as though deciding whether to reveal something he had promised to keep confidential years earlier. "It was installed as an independent verification system," he finally said. "If the primary recording network ever failed or became compromised, Camera 9 would preserve an untouched copy." Judge Holloway slowly closed his eyes. It was obvious he already knew. Cole looked stunned. "Then where is that recording stored?" Walter's expression grew unexpectedly serious. "Not in this building." Every reporter reached for a notebook. Roman felt his heartbeat quicken. If Camera 9 truly recorded independently, then someone outside the courthouse might already possess everything that had happened inside courtroom for that morning. Naira lowered her eyes once more, and for the first time since entering the courthouse, the faintest trace of sadness crossed her face instead of confidence. "Then we're almost out of time," she said quietly. No one asked what she meant, But somewhere beyond the courthouse walls, a cell phone began ringing on a desk that had been empty only moments before. Trust is easiest to destroy when it arrives wearing a familiar face. Walter Grayson's revelation about Camera 9 spread through the courthouse faster than any official announcement. Within minutes, state investigators requested temporary control of the building, while county officials argued over jurisdiction. Reporters crowded every hallway searching for answers, but every question only uncovered another contradiction. If the independent recording existed somewhere outside the courthouse, then the entire hearing had become something far larger than a single criminal case. Roman Keene stood quietly near Naira Ellison while deputies reorganized courtroom security. He replayed every conversation from the morning inside his head. The forgotten camera, the missing case, the empty USB drive, the old personnel file. None of it resembled coincidence anymore. Cole Maddox watched Roman from across the room with growing suspicion. "You're getting too close to her," he said. Roman answered calmly. "I'm getting closer to the truth." Cole laughed without humor. "Careful. People lose careers chasing stories like this." Roman met his eyes. "Maybe some stories are worth it." Before Cole could respond, Judge Everett Holloway quietly instructed Roman to escort Naira from the courtroom while investigators reviewed the building. "Take her to the secure holding area," the judge said. "No interviews. No contact with the press." Roman nodded, though something about the order felt strangely urgent. As he guided Naira through the courthouse corridor, dozens of reporters shouted questions from behind security barriers. She ignored every microphone. She never glanced toward the cameras. She simply continued walking with the same steady pace she had maintained since entering the building hours earlier. Halfway down the corridor, Roman lowered his voice. "Did you expect all of this?" Naira answered after several seconds. "Not all of it." "What surprised you?" She looked ahead instead of at him. "That you're still asking questions instead of choosing a side." Roman frowned. "Shouldn't I? Most people already have." They reached the underground transport entrance where an unmarked county vehicle waited. Another deputy handed Roman transfer paperwork requiring Naira's signature before transportation to the detention facility. Roman reviewed the documents carefully. Everything appeared routine. He secured the paperwork, opened the rear passenger door, and the vehicle quietly left the courthouse grounds. For nearly 5 minutes, neither of them spoke. Downtown Ashcroft gradually disappeared behind rows of aging warehouses and railroad crossings. Then Roman noticed something that made his stomach tighten. They were no longer driving toward the county detention center. He looked through the windshield. "This isn't the right route," he said to the driver. The deputy behind the wheel never answered. Instead, he turned onto an older industrial road leading away from government buildings altogether. Roman immediately reached for the radio. Only static responded. The same lifeless silence that had filled the courtroom earlier returned once again. He looked toward the driver. "Pull over." The driver calmly removed one hand from the steering wheel and handed Roman a sealed envelope without speaking. Confused, Roman opened it. Inside rested a single sheet of paper containing only one sentence. "If you want the recording, stop following the map everyone else received." Roman stared at the message. There was no signature, no instructions, just those words. He looked toward Naira. She remained perfectly calm. "Did you know about this?" he asked. "No," she answered honestly. "But I know whoever sent it doesn't trust official channels." Roman studied her face, searching for deception. He found none. The driver finally spoke. "Check your navigation system." Roman looked at the dashboard screen. The destination displayed was no longer the detention center. It now pointed toward an abandoned federal archive facility nearly 12 miles outside the city limits. "Who changed that?" Roman asked. The driver slowly shook his head. "It changed by itself." Every instinct told Roman to return to the courthouse immediately. Every unanswered question told him doing so might destroy the only chance of finding the missing recording. He made a decision that would later divide public opinion for years. "Keep driving," he said quietly. Naira looked at him for the first time since leaving the courthouse. "Most people would call this betrayal," she said. Roman gave a faint, uncertain smile. "Maybe. And what would you call it?" she asked. He watched the empty highway stretching ahead before answering. "Verification." Meanwhile, back inside courtroom 4, Cole Maddox discovered that Roman had not followed the approved transfer route. Furious, he reported the deviation immediately. "He's helping her escape," Cole insisted. State investigators began treating Roman as a possible accomplice. Television stations interrupted regular programming, with breaking news banners reporting that a courthouse bailiff had diverted the transport of the day's highest-profile defendant. Tessa Rowan refused to accept the official explanation. She compared the transport authorization with the paperwork Roman had signed only minutes earlier and noticed something almost invisible. The destination code on the carbon copy no longer matched the original order she had photographed earlier in the day. Someone had altered the record after Roman left the courthouse. She slowly closed her notebook and whispered to herself, "The betrayal isn't happening inside that vehicle." She looked toward the courthouse archive room where the old personnel file had been stored. "It's happening behind whoever keeps rewriting the paperwork." People often believe cameras capture everything, but the most valuable recordings are usually the ones nobody remembers installing. The unmarked transport vehicle rolled through the outskirts of Ashcroft until abandoned government buildings replaced busy intersections and office towers. Weeds pushed through cracked pavement, faded federal signs leaned at odd angles, and broken chain-link fences surrounded a complex that had officially closed more than 15 years earlier. Roman Keene looked through the windshield in disbelief. "This place was supposed to be demolished," he said quietly. The driver nodded once. Officially, the heavy security gate ahead stood partially open as though someone had expected them. No guards appeared. No patrol vehicles waited nearby. The silence felt deliberate rather than abandoned. Roman stepped out first, scanning the empty property before helping Naira from the vehicle. She looked toward the weathered brick archive building with unmistakable recognition. "You've been here before," Roman observed. She answered honestly. "A long time ago." Before he could ask another question, the front entrance unlocked with a metallic click despite no one touching it. Inside, dust covered old filing cabinets and disconnected computer terminals, yet emergency lights still glowed faintly along the ceiling. Someone had maintained the electrical system. They followed the illuminated hallway until they reached a secure records room protected by a steel door. Attached to the handle hung a plain envelope addressed only to Roman. He opened it carefully. Inside rested a brass key and a handwritten note. The record was never lost. It was moved before anyone could erase it. Roman inserted the key into the old lock. The mechanism resisted for a moment before slowly turning. The steel door opened to reveal a compact climate-controlled archive unlike the neglected rooms outside. Shelves held carefully labeled storage cases stretching from floor to ceiling. None appeared damaged. None appeared abandoned. On a central table sat a single black equipment case with a label that read Camera 9 Archive. Roman exchanged a silent glance with Naira before opening it. Inside rested an aging digital recorder connected to multiple encrypted storage drives. A printed instruction card lay beside the equipment. "Play primary file." Roman hesitated only briefly before pressing the power button. The monitor flickered to life. Grainy but remarkably clear footage filled the screen. The timestamp matched the beginning of that morning's hearing. Camera 9 had recorded every moment exactly as Walter Grayson described. Roman watched as Naira entered the courtroom, as Cole Maddox escorted her forward, as spectators settled into their seats. Every movement appeared from the elevated angle above the jury box. "It's all here," Roman whispered. Then something happened that none of them expected. The recording continued several minutes before the official hearing began. During that earlier period, Judge Everett Holloway entered the empty courtroom alone. Moments later, Cole joined him. There was no audio, but the two men exchanged a brief conversation before Holloway looked toward the courtroom entrance and made one deliberate hand gesture. Cole nodded once. Roman leaned closer to the monitor. "Can you enhance that?" The driver adjusted the playback controls and enlarged the image. Holloway's gesture became unmistakably clear. It was not random. It was an intentional signal. Seconds later, the recording showed Cole positioning himself near the exact location where Naira would later stand. Roman felt the room grow colder. The courtroom confrontation had not unfolded spontaneously. At least part of it had been anticipated before the hearing even began. Naira watched without satisfaction. Instead, quiet disappointment crossed her face. "I hoped I was wrong," she admitted softly. Roman replayed the sequence again. "He signaled him," he said, before anyone entered. The driver remained silent while continuing through additional footage. Then another surprise appeared. Just before Naira looked toward Camera 9 for the first time, Judge Holloway briefly glanced upward toward the second-floor observation window, the same window he had continued watching throughout the hearing. Roman froze the image. Reflected faintly in the glass stood the silhouette of another individual observing the courtroom from above. The figure remained too distant for identification, yet one detail stood out clearly. The person wore no judicial robe and no law enforcement uniform. Someone else was directing this, Roman whispered. Naira slowly nodded. The judge was never the highest authority in that room. Hundreds of miles away, or perhaps only a few blocks, someone had been watching events unfold from behind the glass while remaining invisible to everyone below. Meanwhile, back at the courthouse, Tessa Rowan finally obtained maintenance blueprints from Walter Grayson. Studying the original architectural drawings, she discovered a forgotten notation beside the observation window. Access limited to oversight suite. She frowned. Oversight by whom? Walter quietly answered. That room was never assigned to the courthouse. Before Tessa could ask another question, her phone vibrated with an anonymous message containing only 6 words. Stop looking at the judge. Look higher. She immediately looked toward the second-floor window overlooking the courtroom. It was empty now, but for the first time she realized the window itself had never been the destination. It had only been the place where someone powerful had chosen to watch without ever appearing in the official record. Justice does not always arrive with a verdict. Sometimes it arrives when the people who believe they controlled the story discover they were only characters inside someone else's record. Roman Keane replayed the Camera 9 footage several more times, searching every frame for details that might explain the shadow behind the observation window. The unknown figure never stepped into full view, yet one fact had become impossible to deny. Judge Everett Holloway had not been acting independently. Someone outside the official chain of authority had influenced the hearing before it even began. Roman carefully copied the recording onto multiple encrypted drives before closing the archive case. This can't disappear again, he said quietly. Naira Ellison nodded. Now it won't. The driver looked toward the entrance as distant sirens echoed across the empty federal property. We don't have much time. Roman expected panic, but Naira remained composed. We were never racing to escape, she replied. We were racing to preserve the truth. Back at the courthouse, state investigators confronted Judge Holloway with the restored personnel file, the altered scheduling records, and the newly discovered blueprint identifying the hidden oversight suite. Tessa Rowan had already published a brief report asking one simple question that spread across every major news outlet before officials could contain it. If Camera 9 existed specifically to preserve untampered evidence, why had no one mentioned it until today? Public attention shifted almost instantly. The discussion was no longer centered on Naira. It centered on the integrity of the courthouse itself. Cole Maddox watched television monitors inside the administration office as commentators questioned his conduct during the hearing. For the first time in his career, he had no confident explanation. Every interview request went unanswered. Every attempt to redirect attention back toward Naira failed because new facts continued emerging faster than old accusations could survive. Roman returned to the courthouse carrying the archived recording under official evidence protection. He walked through the same front entrance where the day had begun, but everything felt different. Reporters stepped aside rather than shouting questions. Deputies who had doubted him hours earlier now watched in complete silence. Inside courtroom 4, Judge Holloway stood alone beside the empty bench. He looked older than he had that morning, as though years of carefully maintained certainty had disappeared within a single day. Roman placed the secured evidence case on the clerk's table without saying a word. Holloway looked at it for several long seconds. Is it complete? He asked quietly. Complete enough, Roman answered. The judge lowered his head. Then there's nothing left for me to decide. Later that afternoon, before any formal disciplinary hearing could begin, Holloway submitted his resignation to the State Judicial Commission. He offered no public defense and no lengthy explanation. His written statement contained only one sentence. Public confidence must always matter more than personal position. News organizations debated his motives for weeks, but no one ever disputed the timing. Cole Maddox was placed on administrative leave pending multiple independent reviews concerning courtroom conduct and procedural decisions. He left the courthouse through a side entrance without speaking to waiting reporters. The headlines that followed no longer described him as the officer who controlled the room. They described him as one part of a much larger story still unfolding. Tessa continued investigating the mysterious oversight suite, but every official record concerning its original purpose had vanished long before she arrived. The anonymous messages stopped as suddenly as they had begun. Walter Grayson quietly returned to retirement, saying only that forgotten systems sometimes outlive the people who built them. As for Roman, he declined every television interview offered to him. When colleagues asked why he had risked his career by following a route that seemed unauthorized, he simply answered, "Because paperwork can be changed. Evidence can't." Naira Ellison was never celebrated with dramatic speeches or public ceremonies. Once investigators confirmed the restored archive and verified multiple inconsistencies surrounding the proceedings, the legal process involving her quietly came to an end. She left the courthouse the same way she had entered it, without seeking attention, without asking for applause, and without speaking to the cameras waiting outside. 3 months later, another hearing began inside the renovated courthouse. Camera 9 had been officially restored as a permanent independent recording system. On the clerk's desk rested a familiar silver USB drive, still completely empty. New employees occasionally asked why it remained there inside a small display case. Veteran staff simply smiled and answered, "It's a reminder." No plaque explained further. No official history mentioned the strange morning that changed the courthouse forever. Yet every person who had been present understood the meaning without reading a single word. The empty drive represented every truth that powerful people believed they had erased, every record they thought no one would ever question, and every quiet voice they assumed would never be heard. Somewhere beyond Ashcroft County, Naira began another ordinary morning, unknown to the strangers passing beside her. They saw only a quiet woman walking alone beneath the autumn sky. None of them realized they were passing someone who had never needed revenge to change the outcome. She only needed the truth to survive long enough to be seen, because dignity is never restored by the loudest person in the room. It is restored by the one who refuses to let the truth disappear.